Hey guys, what's up? We're back with another BioLayne Video Log. And yes, representing Tampa Bay, Buccaneers. Didn't do well our first game. We lost to the Jets. We don't want to talk about that, so it is Sunday today when I'm filming this, so I have my Bucs jersey on and didn't feel like changing, so go Bucs. I haven't come out with a video log in a while. There's been a lot of stuff going on in my life, obviously. You know, most of you guys know we have a 3-month-old. I've been traveling a lot, and then I had a death in the family. My aunt passed away unexpectedly last week, and that was very hard for the family, obviously, and we had to travel about 1,000 miles for that, for the funeral. I guess the good part of that is she was buried in our family cemetery in St. Louis. I'm not from St. Louis, but a large part of my family is, and that's where one of our big family cemetery on my mother's side is. And she was buried there, and my grandfather is buried there, who Robert is named after. And we got to take a picture in front of my grandfather's grave, and that was really cool because he was an amazing person. I don't want to get into too much before I get into this video log, but that was very neat. For us to be able to take a picture of Robert in front of the grave of his namesake. My grandfather's my hero, one of the most just finest men I've ever known. Funny, enormous amount of integrity, extremely hard worker, just give you the shirt off his back kind of guy. If I could wind up to be half the man he was, I would be a very happy person. So anyways, I just wanted to explain why I'd been a little bit tardy on getting some video logs out. So my apologies for that. Okay, today I want to talk about experience versus education. I get that a lot because people will look at me and they'll say, okay, well you've done shows, you've done powerlifting meets, you've done well in that, and then you've also you've done a PhD, you've done your bachelor's in biochemistry. So people ask me, if you had to pick, what's more important towards being a good coach, towards being able to instruct others in achieving results. And to be honest, I think a lot of times people prop up the two as mutually exclusive. That either you're a bro scientist, all experience. This is what works for my clients, or you're a science geek in a lab coat. And I think there's a new breed of scientists that are dispelling that. I know probably half a dozen competitors who are either, or probably more than that, done their masters or are doing their PhDs or have finished their PhDs. I mean, look at Chris Foss. He's a IFPA pro. He's done powerlifting meets and done well. And Chris actually is a professor now. He was a good friend of mine at the University of Illinois when I was there. And he's a professor now, and he published a paper on his prep for a bodybuilding show on some of the body physiological responses to prepping for a natural bodybuilding show. There's a paper out there about prep for a natural bodybuilding show. So I don't think the two are mutually exclusive, and I think in the next 10 years you're going to see a lot of questions get answered with regards to nutrition and training, because there's just going to be more people who have an interest in competing who also want to be educated. So I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. And to be honest, I think both are important. I think both are really important. A lot of people know that I get on my anti-guru, anti-bro scientist bandwagon, and yeah, those things do annoy me. It was funny. I got in a debate about a scientific organization that recently partnered up with somebody who's very well known, or a group that's very well known for being bro scientists. And one of the things I said, people were discussing it and whether or not it reduced the credibility of that group. One of the things I said was that I'm okay, because people will ask me, well, do you have to have something shown in a scientific paper for you to support it, or for you to even consider it? And no, I don't. There have been certain things that I've gotten feelings about and hypothesized about that don't have hard data to back them up. But I always try to be honest about that. I try to, if I'm making an opinion on something, I try to say, this is my opinion. And I'm sure I've missed and forgotten to do that a few times, but for the most part, I really try to express when I'm not talking about set data, when I'm talking about my opinion. And I think one of the, even worse than broscientists are what I call people who are exclusively abstract scientists. What do I mean by that? Well, these people typically, they read, I'm not going to say they read research, they scout for conclusions on abstracts that fit their preconceived biases, and they post these abstracts, and this is proof of, to support their beliefs or biases. Well, in a way, that's even worse than broscientists. I mean, when a broscientist is speaking, you can usually tell when they're a broscientist, because they don't attempt to provide any evidence to back up their position. It's just, well, this is what works. Whereas an abstract scientist, they haven't done any real research. They don't have, really have any credentials, but they will present themselves to people as a scientist or as a person of science. And typically they will cherry pick data. Now, there are people out there who are honest and do try to present research as best they can, but a lot of these abstract scientists are big time cherry pickers of data. So what is the problem with that? Well, the average person doesn't know, right? They're just taking this person's or these people's opinions on something. And the problem with reading a scientific abstract and just looking at the conclusion and taking that conclusion and saying, well, this is the holy grail, this is all that matters. The conclusion of a scientific paper is actually nothing more than the opinion of the scientist who wrote the paper based on that data. And that's open to interpretation. Okay, what do I mean by that? Well, hard data is hard data, right? Well, the data is what the data is. The data is typically very good. But that data can be misinterpreted, even by the people who collected it. Or that data can be misinterpreted by the people reading it and then presented as something that it's not. Let me give you an example of this. About 10 years ago, there was quite a bit of research that came out of France on whey protein versus casein protein. And the conclusions from those papers was that, well, the conclusions the authors made, I believe, and I may be slightly off, but they basically said that they thought casein was better for muscle protein anabolism based on their findings. And so, it started appearing in Flex Magazine, it started appearing in a lot of other publications, and people presented it as, well, you want casein, not whey, because casein is more anabolic. Okay? Well, this is a perfect example of where just reading a conclusion is going to, I don't want to say mislead you, but it's important. There are some things where you have to actually have done research in order to understand the differences and the nuances of the data. And the reason I bring this particular case up is because it's not that the data was bad, and they didn't make up the data or anything like that. The data was actually great. It was fantastic data. Their technique was extremely innovative and very cool. The problem was, in the case of casein versus whey, they were looking at whole body protein synthesis. Okay? The problem with, so they're looking at the rate of protein synthesis throughout the entire body, every tissue. The problem with that is that your muscle tissue turns over extremely slow compared to a lot of other tissues in your body. Muscle tissue turns over about 1% per day, 1 to 2% per day, something like that in adult humans. Well, your liver and intestine turn over like 40 to 60% per day. I believe something like that. I mean, it's a very fast turnover rate. So when you look at whole body protein synthesis, your rate of whole body protein synthesis is probably going to be much more strongly influenced by the rate of your splanchnic tissue and gut tissue turnover than your muscle protein turnover, because it's such a discrepancy in the rates of the two. And if you look at virtually every study, and Dr. Stuart Phillips from McMaster has done a lot of these, and then we have also our data has shown very similar results, that if you look at something like whey versus other proteins, including casein, whey is almost always better. And that the rapid emptying of whey into the bloodstream is a good thing because it spikes plasma leucine. And if you look at actually specifically muscle protein synthesis, so not looking at the other tissues, just looking at muscle protein synthesis, which is muscle protein anabolism, whey is better than casein. Okay, and I'm not faulting people who looked at this research and regurgitated it onto recommendations. I'm not necessarily faulting those people, because if you hadn't done research in muscle protein turnover, it's likely that you wouldn't know the difference between those techniques, the difference between whole body protein synthesis and muscle protein synthesis, and why what you use is important. So that's why it is important to have education, have a research background, because you just wouldn't know some of those things. Now, am I saying that nobody should read an abstract and be able to take anything from it? No, I'm just saying that be careful when you take somebody's word as gospel, or even take an abstract, conclusion as, 100% scientific truth, because there's nuance to that data. I always try to go in and get the full text if I can, because many times I will look at data and say, well, wow, that I don't agree with their conclusion. And I think a lot of times people will say, I've heard, I don't pay attention to science because, science will say one thing one day and then it'll disprove itself another day. No, for the most part, the data is what the data is. It's just that people have different interpretations of that data. And I think a lot of people like to think that there's black and white outcomes to research, and there's really not. That's why when we do research, we raise more questions than we answer. I wish I could say that my PhD thesis was like the answered all the questions I ever had about protein, but it didn't. I had more questions when I left. So I think that's important. And another thing to keep in mind when you're talking about that sort of thing and comparing education versus experience is look at it like an architect. Okay? An architect has to take a lot of mathematical classes, a lot of geometry, calculus, all these high-level mathematics classes, right? And a lot of classes probably about engineering as well. And they also have to be good at drawing, right? They also have to be good at drawing to do a blueprint, okay? Now, if I just took those classes, could I go out, if I just had that knowledge, could I go out and build a building? No, because I don't have that practical application of that knowledge yet. I haven't had any experience with that knowledge to be able to turn what I learn, my knowledge base, into something tangible. Now, can an artist copy that blueprint and then go regurgitate it multiple times, redraw it multiple times, and build the same building over and over? Yeah, if they've seen it once. But could you give them something different that you wanted them to do and have them make a blueprint that would be effective for what you wanted? No, of course not, because they don't know how to do anything else. That would be like the Broscientists, right? Because some of these coaches who only give the same meal plan to everybody. Well, That's because that's the meal plan they got from their first coach and the coach before them, etc., etc. And you see this. You see things getting passed down from terrible coach to terrible coach. So it's important to have both, because if you don't have the experience, you can't make it something tangible. But if you don't have the knowledge, you're never going to understand the nuances to the data and how to apply that to different specific scenarios and situations. So what do I say to you guys? What does this all mean for you guys? One is, don't ever look at any person as kind of like the deity of nutrition and training, right? I have my own thoughts and hypotheses and kind of preconceived notions of certain things. And now I try to be honest about those, and I try to keep an open mind, because I've been shown to be wrong about some of my stuff before. I mean, I used to recommend fasted cardio, right? That sort of thing. I used to recommend a lot of things that I no longer recommend anymore, because data has come out to show those things to be not as effective as I thought, or suboptimal. So, but the problem becomes when you follow somebody so fervently. I talked about this in kind of like Don't Be a Zealot, the 5th video log. But you want to be very careful about having beliefs when you're talking about science, okay? Because you shouldn't have beliefs, right? You have hypotheses or theories that you support with data or don't support with data, okay? And your consensus of that data should lead you to decide whether or not something is optimal or not. So I guess just always look at things with a discerning eye. Always ask people to provide evidence. If somebody isn't willing to provide evidence, will they at least acknowledge that then they are stating nothing more than an opinion? When the people you want to be cautious of are the people that, one, will never say the magic words, "I don't know." Trust me, nobody knows everything. The only thing that my bachelor's and PhD taught me was how much stuff I didn't know. And I say I don't know to people pretty much on a daily basis. So that's one thing to keep in mind. If somebody's not willing to say I don't know, then they're on some kind of an ego trip. And get your information from diverse sources. Obviously, the more diversity you use in your sources, the more disagreement there's going to be. Again, things aren't black and white. I think I've used the example of myself and Alan Argon. We disagree on a few things about nutrition. Does that mean that I hate Alan and I think he's an idiot and nobody should follow him? No, absolutely not. I think Alan is an extremely smart guy, and is one of the people I point people to for nutrition advice. That doesn't mean that experts are always going to agree. Heck, even in my own lab, or not my lab, I'm sorry, Dr. Layman's lab, where I did my PhD, we all didn't always agree. Dr. Layman and I still don't agree on some things. But that's the beauty of science, is that's what, if we all just agreed on everything, no research would get done, because we're not trying to prove or disprove anything. I'm sorry, not prove or disprove. Support or disprove things with data. So again, if you ask me what's more important, experience or education, the answer is neither. They're both very important for unique reasons, and you should be trying to gain both. And that's for anything you do, not just necessarily nutrition and training. I would say to you guys out there who are interested, you have a passion for fitness, you have a passion for bodybuilding, whatever it may be. If you have a passion for that, and you want to learn more, and you think you may want to make a career out of it, don't think that you can't do advanced degrees. We need more people like you who are fascinated by nutrition and training, who have an open mind to go and do this research, because you're going to ask the right questions. So if you're interested and you don't know where to start, I will tell you, just real briefly before we finish, I'll tell you how I chose where to do my PhD and what I was interested in. When I decided that I wanted to go to graduate school, I started looking through individual graduate schools, you know, University of Indiana, University of Florida, all these different schools, University of Penn State, to try to find a researcher who fit with my research goals. When you're choosing a graduate school, if you're doing a research-based advanced degree, choose the advisor, don't choose the school. Okay, the school can be important, it can factor into your decision, but for the most part, you got to find somebody who fits your research interest. Because if you go to a school just because it's a good school, and you get an advisor who is not interested in the same stuff you're interested in, the chances are you're going to be studying something you don't want to study. Because if you want, in order to study the stuff you want to study, you're going to have to convince your advisor your stuff's more important. So good luck with that. So choose the advisor. Well, I pretty much figured out really quick that going to each individual school was going to take me forever. So I went to PubMed and I typed in, I think it was leucine skeletal muscle protein synthesis, because that was what was interesting me at the time. And the second paper I found that came up was Dr. Donald Layne. And I was reading through it, and I read through some of his other papers. I was like, man, that sounds like really interesting stuff. I'd really want to get on that. And I emailed him, and I also emailed Kevin Tipton, and I emailed Dr. Leonard Jefferson. Tipton at the time was at University of Texas, I believe, and Dr. Jefferson is at Penn State. And Dr. Tipton wasn't taking graduate students at the time, but Dr. Layne and Dr. Jefferson were. And I went and interviewed, and Dr. Layne just seemed like a great fit, seemed like a great guy, great advisor. And so that's how I chose where to go to graduate school. So if you are, for those of you who are no longer not interested in advanced degrees, you can turn the video off. But if you're interested in an advanced degree, you know, you can always email us, and we can hopefully give you some ideas based on your research interests where might be good to look at. But check out who's doing the research that interests you. If you're interested in, you know, fat metabolism, well, check out who's doing the fat metabolism research that really interests you. If you're interested in leptin, we'll find out who's doing the leptin research. If you're interested in thyroid hormone, we'll find out who's doing the thyroid research. If you're interested in muscle protein synthesis, find out who's doing the research on muscle protein synthesis. Since Dr. Layne is retired, I tell people I think probably the person doing the best stuff out there is Dr. Stuart Phillips at McMaster. So, you know, look for where the research is being done and use that to dictate where you apply. So at the end of the day, again, not only is experience important, education is important. They are king and queen together, peanut butter and jelly, Romeo and Juliet, they go together, okay? If you really want to be great at what you're doing, it's important to have both. So I hope this video has been helpful for you guys, and go Bucks!